You're
So
lying
much
for
hangs in the
attention.
balance in these halls.
That was what my father
feels
said to the judge
precarious,
while I stood
like this
13
cup.
years old in a courthouse
then-
hallway, shaking so hard the paper cup of water in my hand was folding in on itself. I remember the sound of that cup more than I remember my own voice. The thin plastic cracked under my fingers, the water jumped over the rim, and nobody looked at my hand. They were all looking at my father's new wife. She had a tissue pressed under one eye, careful not to ruin her makeup, and every adult in that room seemed to understand her tears better than they understood my silence. My father did not look angry when he said it. That was the part that stayed with me. He looked tired, inconvenienced, like I was a problem he had finally decided to solve in public. 28 years later, when I was 41, I sat in a lawyer's conference room with that same court file between us. My father sat across from me, older, thinner, still wearing the face of a man who believed time could bury anything. He thought the past was gone because no one had spoken of it. But paper remembers better than people. And when my lawyer opened that file, my father finally had to face the sentence he signed onto my life. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am 66 years old now, retired from pipe fitting. Though men like me do not really retire from work. We just stop punching a clock and start fixing things for neighbors, cousins, widows, and anybody who knows we still have tools in the garage. I keep an old red and black flannel jacket behind the seat of my truck, even in summer, because work clothes have always felt more honest to me than suits. A suit can hide a coward. A clean tie can sit above a lying heart. But a flannel jacket tells you what it is. It has paint near the cuff, a burn mark from a welding spark, and a pocket stretched out from carrying a tape measure too many years. I trust things that show where they have been. Maybe that is because when I was 13, the people in clean clothes convinced a courtroom that I was the dirty thing in the room. Before my father's second wife came into our house, we were not a happy family, but we were still a family. My mother had been gone almost 2 years by then. I do not mean gone in the mysterious way people say when they are trying to make a story softer. She died after a winter illness that started as a cough and ended with my father standing in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, one hand on the wall, telling me I had to be brave now. I was 11. I did not know what brave meant, except not making noise when I cried. After the funeral, my father changed in a way I did not have words for. He still went to work. He still paid bills. He still told me to take the trash out on Thursdays. But the inside of him seemed to close like a shop window after dark. He stopped asking me about school. He stopped cooking anything that took more than 10 minutes. He stopped saying my mother's name unless a form required it. I tried to be easy. Children do that when grief enters a house. They make themselves smaller, quieter, less expensive, less hungry. I learned to wash my own clothes, badly, to make sandwiches with the dry edges of bread, to sign school papers with careful little forgeries that no teacher ever questioned because I was polite and my grades were decent. Then he met Marlene. She was not ugly in the way people sometimes want villains to be. She was pretty in a soft, practiced way. Church cardigan, pearl earrings, a voice that lowered whenever other adults were nearby. The first time she came to dinner, she brought a lemon pie and called me sweetheart 3 times before she even knew where the plates were. My father watched her like a man watching weather clear. I remember wanting to like her because I wanted him to come back to life. That is one of the cruelest things about being a child. You will welcome the person who is about to hurt you if they make your lonely parent smile. At first, Marlene did small things. She moved my mother's coffee mug from the kitchen shelf into a box in the pantry. She said it was unhealthy for us to live in a shrine. She threw out my mother's old robe because, according to her, fabric holds sadness. She rearranged the living room so my mother's chair faced the wall, then later disappeared entirely. When I asked where it went, she put a hand to her chest and said, "Daniel, your father and I are trying to move forward." Your father and I. That phrase started appearing everywhere, like a fence being built, board by board. Your father and I think you should spend less time in your room. Your father and I think you should not keep old pictures beside your bed. Your father and I think you are old enough to stop using grief as an excuse. My father rarely said these things himself. He let her speak, and then he stood behind her silence like it was agreement enough. The first time I understood she disliked me, really disliked me, was over a school permission slip. I had left it on the kitchen counter for my father to sign. It was for a field trip to the county museum. Nothing special, but I wanted to go because my history teacher, Mr. Alvarez, had told me I had a good memory for dates. That felt like praise I could hold. The next morning, the slip was gone. Marlene said she had not seen it. My father said I should be more responsible. I found it 2 days later under the trash bag in the kitchen can, damp with coffee grounds, my name bleeding through the paper. When I held it up, Marlene looked at my father and gave a little sad laugh. "See," she said, "this is what I mean. He creates a crisis and then blames me." I expected my father to ask one question, just one. Why would Daniel throw away something he wanted signed? But he did not. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and told me to stop making things difficult. After that, the pattern learned how to walk by itself. My lunch money disappeared from the little ceramic dish near the back door, and Marlene told my father I must have spent it on junk. A pair of my jeans vanished from the laundry, and she said I was hiding dirty clothes because I wanted the house to smell like a locker room. A note from school about parent conferences never reached him, and she said I had probably been embarrassed by my grades, though my grades were the one thing I still kept clean. Every accusation was small enough to sound petty if I defended myself. That was her gift. She never made the lie too large at first. She built a picture out of little strokes until my father no longer saw me when he looked at me. He saw the boy she had described, moody, manipulative, attention-seeking, jealous, unstable. The word unstable arrived around Christmas. I remember because there was a plastic wreath on the front door, and Marlene had made me take down the paper ornaments my mother and I had saved since kindergarten. She said handmade decorations looked depressing. One night I heard her in the bedroom talking to my father. Their door was cracked, and I was in the hallway holding a basket of folded towels. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "I'm worried about him," she said. "I know you don't want to see it, but that boy is not right. He watches me. He makes up stories. He wants me gone." My father said something I could not hear. Then she said, "One day he's going to say something terrible about me, and you'll have to choose whether you believe your wife or a disturbed child." I stood there with those towels until my arms ached. I wanted my father to say, "He is not disturbed." I wanted him to say, "That is my son." I wanted him to open the door and find me standing there and be ashamed that I had heard. Instead, he said, "I'll talk to him." That was the night I learned that some betrayals do not begin with shouting. Some begin with a tired man accepting the easiest explanation because the truth would require him to protect someone inconvenient. By spring, Marlene had begun calling the school. I did not know that at first. I only knew teachers started watching me differently. The school secretary asked me once if everything was okay at home, but she asked it in the way adults ask when they already have a folder started. Mr. Alvarez kept me after class and said, "Daniel, if you need to talk, you can." I almost did. I almost told him about the missing permission slip, the thrown-away pictures, the way Marlene stood in my bedroom doorway when my father was not home and said, "You know, boys like you end up in places where nobody has to pretend to love them." But shame is a strange thing. Even when you have done nothing wrong, shame makes you protect the people hurting you because saying it out loud makes it real. I shrugged and told him I was fine. He did not believe me. That may have saved me later, though I would not know it for 28 years. The incident that sent us to court happened on a Tuesday evening in May. I remember the day because the air smelled like cut grass and hot pavement, and I had stayed late at school to help Mr. Alvarez stack books. When I came home, Marlene was in the kitchen with a broken picture frame on the floor. It was one of my mother's pictures, the last one I had kept hidden inside a math book. Somehow, Marlene had found it. The glass was cracked, and the photo had a crease through my mother's face. I dropped my backpack and asked what she had done. She smiled, but only with one side of her mouth. "Your father needs to understand what you're becoming," she said. I bent down to pick up the photo, and she stepped back quickly, knocking her own hip into the counter. The sound brought my father in from the garage. Before I could speak, Marlene let out a sob that seemed to come from a switch being flipped. She said I had cornered her. She said I had raised my hand. She said I had been screaming that she would never replace my mother. I was screaming by then, but not before. That mattered, or it should have mattered. My father looked at the broken frame, at Marlene holding her side, at me with my fists clenched around a torn photograph. And he made his choice before asking one honest question. He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave finger marks and said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I told him she was lying. I told him she broke the picture. I told him she had been saying things when he was not home. The more I talked, the more Marlene cried. The more she cried, the less my father heard me. That night he slept on the couch outside their bedroom door like he was guarding her from me. I sat on my bed with my mother's creased picture under my pillow, staring at the doorknob, understanding for the first time that my father did not just fail to protect me. He had joined the other side. The next few days became a blur of offices and forms. A counselor spoke to me at school. Someone from Child Services came to the house. Marlene wore long sleeves even though the weather was warm. She spoke softly, bravely, with little pauses that made adults lean toward her. My father sat beside her and looked straight ahead. When I tried to explain, I sounded exactly like what she had trained them to expect. Upset, emotional, desperate, too loud. I said she hated me. I said she was trying to get rid of me. I said she had planned it. Every sentence made the adults write more. There is a terrible trap waiting for children in rooms like that. If you cry, you are unstable. If you get angry, you are dangerous. If you go quiet, you are hiding something. And if the adult hurting you knows how to stay calm, the room will call that calmness truth. The hearing was scheduled faster than I understood. Nobody explained much to me. They told me it was to determine what arrangement would be safest. Safest for whom, I wondered, but I did not ask. My father drove us to the courthouse in silence. Marlene sat in the front seat with a tissue already in her hand. I sat in the back wearing a button-down shirt that was too tight at the collar because Marlene had bought it and said, "At least try not to look feral." My father heard that. He said nothing. The courthouse smelled like floor wax, wet wool, and coffee burned down to the bottom of a pot. I remember the hallway lights buzzing overhead. I remember a vending machine humming beside a row of wooden benches. I remember wanting my mother so badly that my chest hurt. Not because I thought she could fix everything with magic, but because she would have looked at my face first. She would have known when I was scared. My father stood a few feet away with his hands in his pockets. Marlene sat beside him, dabbing her eyes, accepting murmured comfort from a woman with a clipboard. Once my father glanced at me. Just once. I tried to hold his eyes and send him every word I could not safely say. "Dad, please. Dad, you know me. Dad, don't let her do this." He looked away. When they called us in, the room was smaller than I expected, not like the courtrooms on television. No grand speeches, no dramatic witness stand glowing under justice. Just a tired judge, a few chairs, papers sliding across a table, adults using calm voices to discuss where a boy should go. Marlene spoke first. She said she had tried to love me. She said I rejected every kindness. She said I was obsessed with my mother and hostile toward her. She said she feared what I might do if I remained in the house. Her voice broke exactly when it needed to. My father put one hand on her shoulder. I watched that hand. I had not felt it on my shoulder in months. Then someone asked me if I wanted to respond. My mouth went dry. I said she was lying. I said she had hidden my things and thrown away my mother's picture. I said she had told me boys like me end up where nobody has to love them. I looked at my father as I said that last part because surely, that would wake something in him. The judge turned to my father. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "do you believe your son is telling the truth?" My father inhaled. Marlene lowered her face into the tissue. I remember the paper cup in my hand. I remember the crackle of it. I remember my father's shoes, polished for court, pointed not toward me but toward her. Then he said it. "No, Your Honor. He's lying for attention." The room did not explode. That is what people who have never been destroyed imagine, that destruction makes a sound. It does not always. Sometimes it lands quietly, and everybody keeps breathing except you. I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, waiting for his face to change, waiting for some hidden father inside him to break through and say he was sorry. But he only looked relieved, as if the hardest part was over now that he had finally said the thing out loud. After that, the adults moved more quickly. Papers changed hands. Someone spoke about temporary placement. Someone else spoke about evaluation. My father signed where they told him to sign. I watched the pen move across the page. His signature was strong, clean, confident. Daniel Mercer, Sr. He wrote it like a man paying a bill. He did not know, or did not care, that he was purchasing my exile with that ink. I was not allowed to go home that night. A woman drove me to a foster placement 40 minutes away. She tried to be kind. She asked if I wanted the radio on. I said no. My mother's creased photograph was still in my pocket. I had folded it so many times by then that the paper had gone soft at the edges. At the Foster house, a woman named Mrs. Handley showed me a narrow bed, a dresser with one drawer that stuck, and a bathroom I would share with 2 other boys. She said, "We'll get you settled." I wanted to ask how long settled took. I wanted to ask whether fathers ever came back after saying what mine had said. Instead, I put my small bag on the bed and nodded, because I had learned that needing too much made adults tired. My father did not visit the first week, or the second. A social worker said he was giving me time to adjust. That phrase became another locked door. Adjust meant stop asking. Adjust meant accept the story. Adjust meant become quiet enough that the adults could feel successful. Marlene sent 1 box of my things after a month. Not my mother's mug, not the old photo albums, not the baseball glove my father and I had used in the yard before she came. Just clothes, 2 school books, and a pair of shoes that were already too small. At the bottom of the box was a note in Marlene's handwriting. "This is for the best." No signature. She did not need one. My father's signature was already on the document that mattered. The years after that did not turn me into something dramatic. I did not become a criminal. I did not become a genius. I became careful. Foster care teaches you to read rooms before entering them. It teaches you which floorboards creak, which adults drink after 9, which compliments are safe, which promises are just weather. I learned to keep my belongings in one bag when possible. I learned not to get attached to furniture, curtains, family traditions, or the smell of anyone else's dinner. I learned that records follow you. At school, new counselors always seemed to know something about me before I introduced myself. They used phrases like history of attention-seeking behavior, and family conflict, and credibility concerns. Those words did not come from me. They came from the file. My father's sentence had grown legs. It walked into offices before I did. Still, there were people who helped me survive without making a performance out of saving me. Mr. Alvarez kept sending books through the school office even after I transferred. Mrs. Handley taught me how to iron a shirt collar. A shop teacher named Mr. Bowers let me stay after class and work with copper pipe because he said, "Pipe tells the truth. If the joint leaks, you did it wrong. If it holds, it holds." I liked that. I liked a world where results mattered more than rumors. By 17, I knew I wanted work that could be measured. Pressure test, level line, clean weld. No tissue tears, no courtroom voices, no adults deciding truth by who looked more wounded. When I aged out, I carried 2 bags and a folder of documents I hated but knew better than to lose. I worked wherever someone would teach me. Basements, boiler rooms, construction sites in January when your fingers went numb inside gloves. Men yelled, foremen cursed, pipes burst at terrible hours. But the work did not ask me to explain whether I had been a good child. It only asked whether I could show up. So I showed up. Year after year, I built a life that looked ordinary from the outside. Rented rooms, used trucks, lunch packed before dawn, paychecks folded into envelopes, flannel jackets worn thin at the elbows. I did not talk about my father. When people asked if I had family, I said, "Not close." That was easier than saying my father once sat in a courtroom and traded me for a quieter marriage. But silence is not the same as healing. I carried that sentence into every room where someone doubted me. I heard it when a supervisor questioned a measurement I knew was right. I heard it when a landlord looked at my old records too long. I heard it when forms asked whether I had ever been subject to court supervision, placement, evaluation. I heard it in my own head when good people tried to love me. And I wondered what version of me they would believe if someone cried convincingly enough. At 13, I thought my father's betrayal was a moment. By 41, I understood it had been paperwork. And paperwork, unlike memory, does not fade just because the man who signed it gets older. That was why, 28 years after the courthouse, I walked into the county records office on a rainy Thursday morning with my work boots leaving dark prints on the tile and asked for a copy of my juvenile placement file. I did not go there looking for revenge. I went because an insurance matter had asked for documentation tied to an old court record, and I was tired of explaining a file I had never been allowed to read. The clerk behind the counter was a woman with silver hair, red glasses, and the patient expression of someone who had seen people discover bad news in public. She took my identification, typed my name, then typed it again, more slowly. "Daniel Mercer," she said. "Date of birth?" I gave it to her. She looked from the screen to me, then back to the screen. "There may be an additional sealed attachment." I remember feeling nothing at first. Not fear, not hope, just a practical irritation. The kind you feel when a pipe hidden behind a wall turns out to have another valve nobody marked. She disappeared into the back for a long time. Rain tapped against the windows. A fluorescent light flickered over the waiting chairs. I stood there in my old flannel jacket, 41 years old, with scarred hands and gray just starting at my temples, thinking I had already survived the worst thing that file could say about me. Then the clerk came back holding a dusty county archive folder with a yellow tab curled at the edge. She set it on the counter, but kept one hand on top of it. "Mr. Mercer," she said carefully, "before I release this copy, you should understand there are documents in here you may not have seen." I looked down. On the tab was my name. Under it was my father's, and beneath that, in smaller print, were the words, "Supplemental Sworn Statement." The hallway came back so fast I had to put one hand on the counter. The paper cup, the tissue, the polished shoes, the sentence. For nearly 3 decades, I had thought my father's words had vanished into the air after he said them. But they had not vanished. They had been typed, filed, stamped, and stored in a basement, waiting for the day I would finally be old enough to read the shape of the lie that had carried my name. The clerk did not open the folder right away. She looked at me over the top of her red glasses as if she had learned over many years in that office that paper could bruise people just as badly as fists. "You can review it here," she said, "or request certified copies." Her voice was gentle, but the words "certified copies" made something tighten in my chest. Certified meant official. Certified meant the county had preserved it. Certified meant my father's lie had not lived only in my memory. It had lived in ink. I asked for a place to sit. She led me to a small side table near a window with wire mesh in the glass. Rain blurred the parking lot outside. A vending machine hummed somewhere behind me, and for 1 second I was 13 again, hearing that courthouse machine buzz while adults decided what kind of child I was. The clerk placed the folder on the table and said, "Take your time." People say that when they know time will not help. I opened the folder carefully, like it might still belong to someone else. The first few pages were ordinary, in the cold way government papers are ordinary. My full name, my date of birth, my mother's name with the word deceased beside it, my father's address, temporary placement recommendation, school contact notes. Then I found the phrase I had spent 28 years trying not to become: repeated fabrication for emotional attention. I read it once, then again. The words did not get smaller. They sat there like stones. Underneath them was a summary of Marlene's statement. She claimed I had become obsessed with removing her from the household. She claimed I had threatened to make false accusations if my father did not send her away. She claimed I had broken my mother's picture frame myself to create sympathy. Every sentence was written in the calm language of adults who did not have to live inside the damage. But the part that made my hands go cold was not her statement. I already knew she had lied. The part that changed the room was my father's sworn statement attached behind it. It was 2 pages long. His name was typed at the top, Daniel Mercer, Sr. I had not seen that signature since the courthouse, but my body recognized it before my mind did. Strong D, long tail on the R. The kind of signature a man makes when he is sure the paper will obey him. I read the first paragraph standing up, then realized I had risen from the chair without noticing. I sat back down. My father had written that I had shown a pattern of hostile invention. He wrote that I was unable to accept the remarriage. He wrote that Marlene had made every reasonable effort to provide maternal care. Maternal care. I almost laughed when I saw that. A woman who threw away my mother's things had been granted the language of motherhood, and I had been granted the language of sickness. Then came the sentence that had followed me from school office to foster home to job application. I believe my son knowingly lies for attention and may escalate if returned to the home. I stopped reading there. The window glass showed a faint reflection of my own face, older than the boy in the file, and not nearly as old as I felt. I had built a whole life around not sounding crazy. I had learned to speak carefully, work harder than asked, keep receipts, keep copies, never raise my voice first, never give anyone a reason to use the old words against me. And there they were, at the root of it all. Not rumors, not misunderstandings. My father had written them down. I turned the page. That was when I saw the first thing that did not fit. There was a date stamped on Marlene's statement, May 7th. The incident with the broken picture frame had happened on May 10th. At first, I thought I had misremembered. Memory can shift around pain, I knew that. I did not trust myself easily because the world had trained me not to. But inside the folder was a school attendance note from Mr. Alvarez, dated May 10th, saying I had stayed after class until 5:15 p.m. to help inventory history books. Beside that was a home visit note, dated May 11th, describing the broken frame incident as having taken place the prior evening. I laid the pages side by side. May 7th, May 10th, May 11th. Marlene had given a written statement describing my supposed threat 3 days before the event she claimed caused her fear. I read it 5 times. I pressed my finger against the dates as if the paper might slide away from the truth if I did not hold it still. Then I found the second thing. A counselor's intake note from the school had been marked received but not reviewed before hearing. It included one line from Mr. Alvarez. Student has previously expressed fear of stepmother's private comments, but appears reluctant to elaborate. I sat back slowly. Mr. Alvarez had noticed. He had written something down. Somewhere in that building, an adult had put a small piece of truth into the world, and the system had placed it in a file pocket where nobody bothered to look. The third thing was a medical note from the day after the kitchen incident. It said, "Bruising visible on minor's upper left arm, consistent with forceful grip." My father's grip. Not my attack on Marlene, not my instability. My father's fingers on my arm. The note had a stamp across it, supplemental, late entry. There was no indication it had been considered at the hearing. I do not know how long I sat there. The clerk came by once and asked if I needed water. I said no because I did not trust myself to hold a cup. When I finally looked up, the rain had slowed, and the parking lot had gone silver. I asked for certified copies of everything. My voice sounded calm. That surprised me. Maybe there are kinds of anger that burn so hot they become still. The clerk nodded, but before she took the folder away, she touched the top page lightly. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "you may want an attorney to review this." I looked at my father's signature again. "I know," I said. "That's where I'm going next." I did not have a lawyer then. Men like me usually only know lawyers from billboards, divorces, accidents, or trouble. I asked 2 people I trusted and ended up with the name of a man named Leonard Price, an attorney with a small office above a pharmacy on Maple Street. He was not flashy, no marble lobby, no young assistants in sharp suits, just a narrow stairwell, a brass plaque, and an office that smelled like old books and coffee that had been reheated too many times. That made me trust him a little. He was in his late 50s with tired eyes and a tie loosened at the collar when I arrived. He shook my hand, looked at the scars across my knuckles, and said, "Mr. Mercer, what can I do for you?" I placed the certified folder on his desk. "I need to know whether paper can lie," I said. He did not smile. Good lawyers know when not to smile. He opened the folder and began reading. At first he made small marks on a yellow legal pad, then the marks slowed, then stopped. He turned back 3 pages, checked the dates, leaned closer, and read them again. I watched his face because I had spent my whole life watching adults decide whether to believe me. Leonard Price did not give me pity. He gave me attention. That was better. After nearly 20 minutes, he removed his glasses and set them on the desk. "Who prepared the stepmother's statement?" he asked. "I don't know." "Was she represented?" "I was 13. Nobody explained anything to me." He nodded once, not because that was acceptable, but because it answered more than the question. He read the school note again, then the medical note, then my father's sworn statement. "Did your father know about the school counselor's concern?" he asked. I thought of the nights Marlene whispered through the bedroom door, the way my father stopped meeting my eyes, the way he grabbed my arm in the kitchen. "He knew enough not to ask," I said. Leonard looked at me for a long moment. "That's not the same as legal knowledge." "I know. But it may matter." He tapped the father's statement with one finger. This was not just an opinion spoken in a hallway. This was a sworn representation used in a placement decision. I had spent 28 years trying to make that day smaller so I could live around it. Leonard Price made it large again, but in the right shape. He did not talk about revenge. He talked about correction, affidavits, record amendment, civil exposure, possible misconduct if documents had been withheld or misrepresented. Some of the legal language passed over me like weather, but I understood the center of it. My father's sentence had become part of an official record. If that sentence was false, or unsupported, or built around documents that had been ignored, then the record itself could be challenged. "What do you want from this?" Leonard asked. That question should have been easy. It was not. I looked at the file on his desk. For years, in private corners of my mind, I had imagined my father suffering. I imagined him old and alone. I imagined Marlene exposed in front of all the people she had fooled. I imagined shouting words so sharp they would finally cut the calm off their faces. But when the real file was sitting there, those fantasies felt childish. What I wanted was stranger and harder. "I want my name cleaned," I said. Leonard nodded. "Money? If the law says something is owed, you can tell me. But that's not why I came." "Then why?" I looked at my father's signature. Because every room I walked into after that, he got there first. Leonard did not answer right away. Then he picked up his pen and wrote something at the top of his pad. "All right," he said. "Then we start with notice." The letter went out 11 days later. I know because I counted every one of those days. I went to work. I replaced a corroded section of pipe in an apartment building basement. I ate ham sandwiches in my truck. I answered questions when spoken to. But inside me, something had shifted. For almost 3 decades, the past had been a locked room in my own life. Now someone had found the key, and I was standing outside with my hand on the knob. Leonard's letter was formal, clean, and cold. It stated that his office represented Daniel Mercer regarding juvenile court records from May of that year. It referenced the sworn statement signed by Daniel Mercer Sr. It noted inconsistencies between attached statements, school records, and medical documentation. It requested a meeting to discuss voluntary correction of the record before further legal remedies were considered. He sent it by certified mail. That detail mattered to me more than it should have. Certified mail for certified lies. My father called me 2 days after he signed for it. I had not heard his voice in years, not directly. There had been a message once when I was in my 30s, left after somebody in the family died, but I deleted it before the end. This time I answered because I wanted to know what the file had done to him. "Daniel." He said my name like a man testing whether an old tool still fit his hand. "Yes." There was a pause. I could hear television noise in the background, then a door closing. "I got a letter from some lawyer." "Then you should talk to him." "Oh, don't start that. What is this about?" I looked out the kitchen window of the small house I was renting then. The yard needed mowing. A neighbor's dog was barking at nothing. Ordinary life, standing right beside the oldest wound I had. "It's about the court file." Another pause, longer this time. "What court file?" I almost admired the instinct, deny the room before entering it. "The one from when I was 13. His breath changed. It was small, but I heard it. Pipe fitters hear pressure shifts for a living. "That was a long time ago," he said. There it was. The first defense of guilty men who do not want to confess. Time. As if years are bleach, as if birthdays erase signatures. "Not in the county archive," I said. "Daniel, I don't know what you think you found. But dragging up the past isn't going to help anybody." It might help me. You always were like this. The sentence came fast, too fast, like it had been waiting in his mouth for 28 years. I felt 13 for half a second, then 41 again. Like what? I asked. He sighed, determined to make things worse than they were. I looked at my hand on the phone. There was a burn scar near my thumb from a steam line repair. That scar had hurt less than his voice. There's a lawyer's number in the letter, I said. Use it. We can talk without lawyers. No, I said. We tried that when I was 13. He did not like that. I could feel his temper step closer. You were a troubled kid. You don't remember everything clearly. I remember your sentence. For God's sake, Daniel. And now I have the paper it landed on. The line went quiet, not silent, quiet. There is a difference. Silence is empty. Quiet has someone hiding in it. Finally, he said, Marlene is not well. I don't want her upset by this. I closed my eyes. After all those years, there she was again, placed between us like a sacred object. You protected her from a child, I said. You can protect her from a folder. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking afterward, but not from fear, from restraint. That is something people do not understand about controlled men. Calm is not the absence of violence inside you. Sometimes calm is violence put on a leash and walked carefully past every open door. Leonard scheduled the meeting for Thursday afternoon. My father agreed, after his own attorney advised him to appear. That gave me my first real sense that the file had weight. My father never respected pain, but he respected liability. On the morning of the meeting, I put on a clean shirt, then took it off and put on another. I owned one suit, dark blue, bought for funerals and formal things that made me feel like I was pretending. I stood in front of the mirror wearing it and saw the 13-year-old boy in the courthouse shirt Marlene had chosen. Too tight at the collar, too easy to judge. I took the suit jacket off. I wore a plain work shirt instead, clean but not polished, and my flannel jacket over it. Maybe that sounds childish. It was not. I was not going to sit across from my father dressed like the men who had believed him. Leonard's conference room had a long oak table, 6 chairs, one window looking down at Maple Street, and a clock that ticked louder than it needed to. I arrived 20 minutes early. Leonard had 3 stacks of paper arranged in front of him, each clipped and tabbed. You don't need to say much today unless you want to, he told me. Let the documents do the work. That sounded simple. It was not. Documents can speak, but first you have to survive hearing them. My father arrived at 2:03 p.m. I remember because I was watching the clock like it owed me something. He came in wearing a gray sport coat and the same expression he had worn in the courthouse. Irritated dignity. He was older, of course. His hair had thinned. His face had softened at the jaw. But age had not made him gentle. It had only made his confidence more brittle. Beside him was a younger attorney with a leather folder and careful eyes. Marlene was not there. I had expected to feel relief at that. Instead, I felt insulted. She had been central enough to ruin my life, but not brave enough to sit with the file. My father looked at me, then at my clothes. His mouth tightened. Daniel? Mr. Mercer, Leonard said, standing before I could answer. Thank you for coming. My father shook his hand but kept his eyes near me. Not on me. Near me. Some habits survive decades. Everyone sat. The room arranged itself around the file. Leonard began politely. He explained that we were there to discuss records from a juvenile placement case, specifically statements used to support removal from the home and subsequent credibility assessments. My father's attorney said they were not admitting any wrongdoing. Leonard said he understood. My father leaned back in his chair as if all of this was beneath him. "I'll be honest," he said. "I don't know what Daniel thinks he's accomplishing here." It was strange hearing him say my name in that room. In his mouth it sounded less like a son and more like a problem being reintroduced. Leonard did not react. "We're seeking correction of an unsupported and potentially false record." My father gave a short laugh. "Unsupported? You weren't there." Leonard looked at the first stack of papers. "No, but these were." He slid the first page across the table. It was Marlene's written statement dated May 7th. My father glanced at it without touching it. "I've seen that." Please note the date." My father's attorney picked it up first. That was the first small shift in the room. The son of a bitch had come in ready to dismiss me, but his attorney came in ready to read. "May 7th, the attorney said. Leonard slid the second page forward. "This is the home visit note describing the alleged incident with the picture frame as having occurred the evening of May 10th. My father's attorney looked at both pages. My father stared at Leonard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Mrs. Mercer gave a detailed statement about an incident 3 days before the record says it occurred." My father's face changed so quickly that anyone who did not know him might have missed it. A flash of uncertainty, then anger placed over it like a tarp. "That's probably clerical." Leonard nodded as if the answer had been expected. "That was our first thought." He slid the third page forward. "This is the school attendance note confirming Daniel was at school until 5:15 on May 10th. And this is the counselor notation received before the hearing, but not reviewed." My father did not pick them up. His attorney did. He read longer this time. The clock ticked. Outside the window, a bus hissed at the curb and pulled away. Inside that room, 28 years began moving backward. My father said, "This is ridiculous." He was a child. He was angry. He hated that I remarried. There it was again, the old story. Not defended, just repeated, because repetition had worked the first time. I felt Leonard glance at me, checking whether I wanted to speak. I did not yet. Leonard opened the second stack. "Mr. Mercer, this is your sworn statement." My father finally reached for a page. I watched his hand touch the paper. It did not shake, not then. "You wrote that your son knowingly lied for attention and might escalate if returned to the home, correct?" "That was my understanding at the time." "Based on what?" "Based on living with him." "Based on any independent evaluation?" "You can't evaluate everything in a family with some form." Leonard's voice stayed even. "No, but you used a form to remove him from one." My father's attorney shifted slightly in his chair. My father looked at him, annoyed, perhaps expecting rescue. The attorney only said, "Let him finish." That may have been the first time I saw my father not control a room. Leonard slid the medical note forward last. He did not rush it. He placed it in the empty space between my father and me, like a tool laid out before repair. This note documents bruising on Daniel's upper left arm the day after the kitchen incident, consistent with a forceful grip. There is no corresponding injury report for Mrs. Mercer in this file. My father stared at the page. For the first time that afternoon, he looked at the paper as if it might look back. I grabbed his arm because he was out of control, he said. The sentence came automatically. Then he seemed to hear himself. Leonard did not raise his voice. That is not what your sworn statement says. My father's jaw tightened. You people are twisting things. I almost smiled at that. You people. Lawyers. Paper. Me. The whole world twisting. Except the man who signed a lie. Leonard folded his hands. No one is twisting anything, Mr. Mercer. We are placing the documents in chronological order. I had spent years thinking justice would feel like thunder. It did not. It felt like chronology. One date beside another, one signature beside one bruise, one ignored note beside one child's ruined name. My father looked across the table then, directly at me for the first time. Is this what you wanted? He asked. His voice was low, almost private, but there were too many documents between us for privacy. You wanted to humiliate me? I thought of the courthouse hallway, the tissue, the paper cup, the adults who looked at me like I was something sticky on the floor. No, I said. My voice sounded rough because I had not used it in that room yet. I wanted you to read. I did what I thought was best. That sentence filled me with a tiredness so old it felt inherited. For who? I asked. He looked away. Not much, just enough to answer. Leonard moved to the third stack. We are prepared to petition for record correction and attach supporting documentation. However, if Mr. Mercer is willing to sign a corrective affidavit acknowledging that his prior statement was unsupported by the full record and should not be used as a credibility finding against Daniel, that would narrow the matter considerably. My father's attorney raised one hand. We need to review language before any discussion of signing. Of course, Leonard said. My father looked stunned, as if the meeting had suddenly become real in a way he had not authorized. I'm not signing something saying I lied. Leonard did not blink. The proposed language does not require that word. But that's what he wants. My father pointed at me then, actually pointed, like I was 13 again and standing near the judge. That's what this is. He wants revenge because he couldn't accept Marlene. I looked at his finger. It was thicker than I remembered, knuckles swollen with age, nail trimmed clean. Once that hand had taught me how to hold a baseball. Once that hand had signed me away. Marlene isn't in the room, I said. She was always in the room with you, he snapped. His attorney said, Mr. Mercer, but it was too late. The sentence had opened something. My father leaned forward, face red now, all the tired dignity gone. You have no idea what it was like. Your mother died, and you just disappeared into yourself. Marlene tried. She tried harder than anyone would have. You were cold to her. You watched her like she was stealing something. She was, I said. She was trying to build a home. She was trying to build one without me in it. He slapped his palm softly on the table, not hard enough to be dramatic, just hard enough to show the old man was still in there. You always had an answer. I leaned forward too, and for a moment I forgot Leonard, forgot the other attorney, forgot the legal language. There was only the boy with the cup and the man with the polished shoes. I was 13, I said. My father opened his mouth, closed it. I said it again, quieter. I was 13. The room changed after that, not because he confessed, Men like my father do not collapse easily, but the air left his argument. There are sentences even liars cannot climb over when spoken plainly enough. His attorney requested a break. Leonard agreed. My father stood too quickly and walked to the window. He kept his back to me. I watched him look down at Maple Street, where people were crossing in raincoats, carrying groceries, living inside lives that had nothing to do with ours. I wondered whether he was remembering the courthouse or calculating risk. I wanted to believe, even then, that some fatherly part of him was waking up. That is the embarrassing truth. At 41, with certified copies on the table, I still wanted him to turn around and say, "Danny, I knew. I'm sorry." I wanted one honest sentence more than I wanted any legal remedy. But wanting truth from someone does not mean they are capable of giving it. After 10 minutes, everyone sat down again. My father's attorney spoke more than my father did now. He asked for copies. He asked about the proposed affidavit. He asked whether filing could be delayed while they reviewed the documents. Leonard gave him 7 days. 7 days? My father said. This is a 28-year-old matter. Leonard looked at him. It was 13 years old when it was used against my client. My father had no answer for that. The meeting should have ended there. But as Leonard gathered the papers, my father said my name again. Softer this time. Daniel. I looked at him. He seemed smaller, but I did not trust smallness. Some people shrink only when the room finally measures them. Your mother's death broke a lot of things, he said. It was the closest he had come to sadness, and for one dangerous second my heart moved toward it. Then he added, "You have to understand that." There it was. Not apology. Context. A blanket thrown over a body and called mercy. I stood up. My mother died, I said. You remarried. Marlene lied. You signed. Those are separate things. His face hardened again because separation is what guilty people fear. They survive by mixing everything together until no single act can be held up to the light. Leonard walked me out after my father and his attorney left. In the hallway, I realized my whole shirt was damp at the back. I had been sweating through the meeting without knowing it. Leonard did not offer me comfort. He handed me my copy of the file in a clean envelope. You did well, he said. I didn't do much. You stayed in the room. I nodded because, for once, somebody understood that staying had been the work. Outside, the rain had stopped. My truck was parked across the street. I sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting it. My flannel jacket smelled faintly of metal dust and coffee. I rested both hands on the steering wheel and noticed they were steady. Not peaceful, not healed, steady. At 13, my father's words had removed me from my own life. At 41, the documents had brought me back to the room where the lie began, and this time I was not holding a paper cup. This time, I was holding certified copies. And 7 days later, when Leonard called to say my father's attorney wanted to discuss language for a corrective affidavit, I understood something I had waited 28 years to feel. My father had not come to that conference room because he loved me. He had not come because memory softened him or age taught him shame. He had come because the file he buried had learned how to speak. 7 days sounds short when you are waiting for ordinary news. It sounds like nothing when you are waiting for a repairman, a paycheck, a medical result that is probably fine. But when you are waiting for the man who ruined your name to decide whether he will correct one sentence, 7 days becomes a hallway. I lived inside that hallway all week. I went to work because work was the only place my body knew what to do. I cut pipe. I checked pressure gauges. I tightened fittings until my wrists ached. Men asked me whether I wanted coffee, whether I had watched the game, whether I could help them move a water heater on Friday, and I answered like a normal person. That is one thing people rarely understand about old wounds. They do not stop you from functioning. Sometimes they make you function better, because motion is safer than stillness. Stillness gives memory room. Every night that week, I came home and looked at the envelope Leonard had given me. I did not read the file again. I had already memorized enough of it to know what it could do to me in the dark. But I kept it on the kitchen table where Bill's usually sat. I wanted to see it. I wanted to remind myself that the thing had shape now. It was not just a voice in a courthouse. It was not just my father's polished shoes pointed toward Marlene. It was pages, dates, contradictions, signatures. It was evidence. On the 6th night, I almost called my father. I picked up the phone and set it down twice. The foolish part of me, the 13-year-old part that had survived but never entirely grown, wanted to make room for him. I imagined saying, "You can still tell the truth before the lawyers finish this." I imagined him sitting alone somewhere, finally understanding what he had done. I imagined his hand over his face, not because he had been caught, but because he was ashamed. Then I remembered his words in Leonard's conference room. "Your mother's death broke a lot of things. Not I broke something. Not I failed you. Not I signed what I should not have signed." He had reached for grief like it was a fog machine, hoping it would cover the table. I left the phone where it was. The next morning, Leonard called while I was eating toast over the sink. Men who have lived alone too long eat like they are borrowing space from themselves. I answered before the second ring. Leonard did not waste time. "Their attorney responded," he said. "They want to discuss language." "Language?" I repeated. "Yes." I looked down at the toast in my hand. I had no appetite left, but I kept holding it. "Does that mean he'll sign?" "It means he understands there is a reason to avoid a petition hearing." There it was again. Not remorse. Pressure. I swallowed what was in my mouth and set the toast aside. "What does the language say?" Leonard read it to me slowly. The affidavit would state that my father's prior sworn statement had been made without full review of available school and medical documentation. It would state that later discovered records created substantial doubt regarding the accuracy of claims made about my conduct. It would state that the prior characterization of me as knowingly fabricating for attention should not be relied upon as a finding of truth. It would request correction or supplementation of the juvenile record to reflect those omissions. I listened without interrupting. The wording was careful, lawyer careful. It did not say my father lied. It did not say Marlene staged the incident. It did not say Daniel Mercer was an abandoned boy whose father chose a woman's performance over his own child's face. But it removed the knife from the record. "Is that enough?" Leonard asked. I knew he was not asking legally. He could have answered that himself. He was asking the part of me no court could represent. I looked at the file on my kitchen table. "No," I said. Then, after a moment, "But it's something." Leonard was quiet for half a breath. "Sometimes something is what the law can hold." "And the rest?" "The rest is yours to decide what to do with." We scheduled the signing for the following Tuesday. My father's attorney insisted on one more meeting rather than exchanging signed papers by mail. Leonard said that was likely because my father wanted to feel less cornered, or more in control, or both. I said I did not care how he felt, as long as the pen touched the page. That sounded hard when I said it. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was only the minimum truth after 28 years of being expected to care how everyone else felt first. The second meeting took place in the same conference room. Same long oak table, same clock, same window over Maple Street. But the room felt different to me now. The first time, I had entered as a man asking whether the old file had weight. This time, I entered knowing it did. Leonard had the affidavit printed in 3 copies, each with a blue tab where my father would sign. I noticed the pen beside them immediately. Blue ink, not black. I asked Leonard why. He said original signatures are easier to distinguish in blue. Simple answer. Practical. But I stared at that pen longer than I should have. At 13, I had watched my father use a pen like a shovel. At 41, I was about to watch him use one like a crowbar, prying open what he had buried. My father arrived 5 minutes late. Not enough to apologize. Enough to make everyone aware he had chosen not to hurry. His attorney came with him. Marlene was with them this time. I had not expected that. Leonard had told me she might come, but hearing a possibility and seeing a woman walk through a door are different things. She was older, of course. Her hair was dyed a soft brown that did not match the wrinkles near her mouth. She wore a cream sweater, pearl earrings, and the same fragile expression I remembered from court. Age had not taken away her talent. It had refined it. She entered the room like someone bracing herself against cruelty, though she had been cruel before anyone there had accused her of anything. For a second, the years folded. I saw the kitchen floor, the broken picture frame, her tissue, my father's hand on her shoulder. Then I saw her eyes move over me, not with guilt, with calculation. She was looking for the boy, the unstable one, the emotional one, the one she knew how to defeat. She did not find him. I stood when they entered because Leonard stood, not because I owed them courtesy. My father avoided my eyes. Marlene did not. She gave me a small, wounded smile. "Daniel," she said, as if my name itself hurt her. I did not answer. Leonard handled the room. He introduced the purpose of the meeting, stated that we were there to review and potentially execute the corrective affidavit, and reminded everyone that no one was required to speak beyond the document. Marlene sat beside my father and placed one hand lightly over his. I watched it happen. The old arrangement. Performed at a smaller table. Her fear, his protection, my supposed danger. But this time there were papers in front of all of us, and papers do not lean toward tears. My father's attorney had a marked-up copy. He requested 2 minor wording changes. Leonard accepted one and rejected the other. They discussed whether substantial doubt should become possible doubt. Leonard said no. My father's attorney tried, "Questions exist." Leonard said no. The clock ticked. Marlene sighed once, softly, but nobody turned toward her except my father. That was the first change I noticed. The first time her sigh would have moved a room. Now it only moved him. Leonard placed the final version in front of my father. "This language is accurate to the documents," he said. "It does not require an admission of intentional falsehood. It does acknowledge that the statement should not stand as written." My father looked at the pages. His face was pale in a way that made him look less angry and more exposed. Marlene leaned toward him. "Daniel always wanted to punish us," she said quietly. Not quietly enough. Leonard looked up. My father's attorney closed his eyes for half a second, the way men do when their client's wife has just harmed the strategy. I looked at Marlene then, really looked at her. For years I had imagined what I would say if I saw her again. I had built speeches in my head while driving through snow before dawn, while lying awake in rented rooms, while filling out forms that asked for explanations I should never have had to give. In those speeches, I destroyed her. I named every theft, every whisper, every staged tear. But in the actual room, she looked smaller than my memory, and no less dangerous. A person does not have to be large to poison a well. "Punish you?" I asked. My voice stayed calm, and because it stayed calm, she seemed to dislike it more. "After all these years," she said, "you have a wife? Children? A life? Or did you spend all of it holding on to this?" It was a clever question. Cruel, but clever. She wanted to make my emptiness evidence against me. If I had no family, I was bitter. If I had one, I should be over it. There was no answer she could not twist, unless I refused the shape of the question. "I've spent it working," I said. "You should try answering documents instead of inventing feelings." Her mouth tightened. My father said, "Don't talk to her like that." And there he was, even at that table, even with the dates in front of him, even with his old signature waiting to be corrected, protecting her tone from me while my childhood lay open in a folder. Something inside me did not break. It settled. I had wondered, secretly, whether this meeting would reveal a hidden father buried under shame. Instead, it revealed the same father, only older and cornered. That hurt, but it also freed me. Leonard slid one page forward. "Mrs. Mercer, since you are present, I'll note that your written statement was dated May 7th. The incident it describes is recorded elsewhere as May 10th. Can you explain that?" Marlene's eyes moved to her attorney, but she did not have one of her own. My father's attorney said, "She is not here to provide testimony." Leonard nodded. Then she should not provide commentary either. The room went still. I almost looked at Leonard in surprise. He had not raised his voice. He had not insulted her. He had simply closed a door she had walked through for 28 years. Marlene sat back. For the first time in my life, I saw her unable to make the room hers. My father picked up the affidavit. He read slowly, or pretended to. I knew he had already reviewed it. His attorney had reviewed it. They had discussed it before arriving. This was not reading. This was a man standing at the edge of surrender, hoping the cliff might move. His eyes stopped at the line about my prior characterization, knowingly fabricating for attention. He looked up at me. "You know," he said, "you weren't easy." Leonard started to speak, but I raised one hand slightly. Not to silence him like a client controlling a lawyer, but to say I could carry this sentence myself. "I was a child whose mother died," I said. My father's jaw worked. "We were all grieving." "No," I said. "That's what you said last time. We were not all grieving the same way. I was grieving my mother. You were grieving your comfort." Marlene made a small, offended sound. I kept my eyes on my father. And when comforting her became easier than protecting me, you called that family. His face changed then, not into apology, into anger with nowhere clean to go. You think life is simple, he said. You think a man can just keep everything together after losing his wife? No, I said. I think a man can avoid lying about his son in court. That landed. Even Marlene did not move. My father looked down at the affidavit again. His thumb rubbed the edge of the page, back and forth, back and forth. I remembered that thumb pressing into my arm in the kitchen. I remembered the bruise blooming purple by morning. I remembered adults writing that I might escalate. My father looked at the medical note attached behind the affidavit and finally said, lower, I grabbed you because you were hysterical. You grabbed me because I was telling the truth loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. His eyes rose. You don't know what she was going through. I know what I was going through. She was scared. So was I. He looked away. That was the second time in all those years that he answered without words. Leonard turned the affidavit so the signature tab faced him. Mr. Mercer, the question is whether you will sign the correction. My father stared at the blue pen. Marlene whispered, Don't let him do this to us. That sentence may have been the most honest thing she ever said in front of me. Not, don't sign something false. Not, this is wrong. Don't let him do this to us. Because in her mind, the truth was something being done to them. My father's hand hovered over the pen. It trembled once, barely. I saw it. Maybe nobody else did. And suddenly I was back in the courthouse hallway with that paper cup trembling in my 13-year-old hand. Time folded again, but differently now. Then, everyone watched my shaking and called it proof that I was unstable. Now I watched his shaking and understood it as proof that paper can outlive power. He picked up the pen. He did not look at me when he signed. That mattered, though I wish it did not. Some childish part of me had wanted him to meet my eyes while correcting the lie. I wanted him to understand that he was not signing against a file. He was signing toward a boy. But his eyes stayed on the page. His signature was slower now. The D was less strong. The tail on the R broke halfway through. Age had entered his hand. Or fear had. Maybe both. When he finished, Leonard rotated the second copy. My father signed that too. Then the third. 3 signatures, each one quieter than the first. No thunder, no confession, no father falling to his knees. Just blue ink drying on paper while the clock kept ticking. Leonard reviewed each copy before nodding once. Thank you, he said. My father set the pen down as if it had become hot. Marlene stared at the signed pages with open dislike. For the first time, I wondered whether she had believed her own story after all these years, or whether she only hated the inconvenience of truth. My father's attorney stood and said they would await the filing confirmation. Leonard said he would send it. The meeting should have ended. Everyone had what they came for, or what they were forced to accept. But my father remained seated. His attorney touched his shoulder. We can go. My father did not move. He looked older than he had when he entered. Not softer, just older. He said my name without looking at Marlene. Daniel. I waited. My whole body waited. Even after everything, the body waits for the father. I was trying to keep my family together, he said. There it was. The sentence he had carried all the way to the edge of apology and mistaken for one. I felt the old pull in my chest, the urge to explain to him, to help him reach the truth. To be a good son, even in the room where he had just corrected a lie about me. Then I let that urge pass. You had a family, I said. You chose which part of it counted. His face tightened, but this time not with anger, with something closer to recognition. Recognition is not the same as remorse, but it is not nothing. Marlene stood sharply. We don't have to sit here and be insulted. My father did not rise right away. That was the only victory over her I ever needed. For once, she moved and he did not immediately follow. For one small second, the room held him still. Then he stood, slowly, and looked at the file. Not at me. The file. I didn't know it would follow you like that, he said. I believed that. I truly did. Not because he was innocent, but because selfish people often understand the wound without understanding the scar. He had wanted me gone from the house, gone from the conflict, gone from between him and the woman he had chosen. He had not cared where the words would go afterward. That was not forgiveness. That was the shape of the crime. You didn't have to know forever, I said. You only had to know I was 13. He flinched then, small, but real. Then he left with Marlene and the attorney, and I remained seated across from the blue pen. Leonard gathered the signed affidavits and placed them in a folder. He did it carefully, almost respectfully. This is a good outcome, he said. I nodded. I knew he was right in the way lawyers are right. The record could be corrected. The old credibility language could be challenged. The file would no longer stand cleanly against me. But good outcome is a small phrase for a man who has waited since childhood for an adult to undo one sentence. What happens now? I asked. Leonard explained the next steps. He would submit the corrective affidavit with the supporting documents, request supplementation of the juvenile record, and push for formal notation that the prior statement should not be treated as a reliable finding against me. It might take weeks, maybe months. The court might not erase the original file, because courts rarely erase what happened. But it could attach the truth to the lie, so that anyone who opened the record afterward would have to see both. I liked that more than I expected. Erasure had never been my real dream. I knew what happened. I lived what happened. I did not need the old paper to disappear. I needed it to stop standing alone. A lie with no answer becomes history. A lie with the truth attached becomes evidence of who tried to bury it. We filed. We waited. This waiting was different from the first 7 days. It was still heavy, but it had movement inside it. Leonard sent me copies of every submission. I kept them in a metal lockbox under my bed, the same kind of box where other men keep deeds, medals, divorce papers, old photographs. I had very few photographs. Marlene had made sure of that. But now I had documents. Some people might find that sad. I did not. Documents had hurt me. It seemed only fair that documents help carry me back. During those weeks, my father called once. I let it ring. He left a message. I listened to it 3 days later after work, standing in my kitchen with grease still under my nails. His voice sounded smaller through the machine. He said he hoped I was satisfied. Then he paused long enough that I almost thought he had hung up. Finally, he said, "Marlene says you'll never let this go." Another pause. "Maybe you shouldn't." That was all. I played that last line twice. Maybe you shouldn't. It was not an apology. It was not enough. But it was the first time I had ever heard him suggest, even sideways, that my refusal to swallow the lie might be reasonable. I did not call him back. Not because I wanted to punish him, because for once I did not want to rush toward crumbs and call them bread. The court's response came on a cold morning in November. Leonard called first, but I asked him to mail me the copy too. I wanted to hold it. When the envelope arrived, I sat at my kitchen table and opened it with a pocket knife. My hands did not shake. The order was not dramatic. Legal documents rarely are. It stated that the supplemental affidavit and supporting records were accepted for filing. It stated that the prior characterization of the minor as knowingly fabricating for attention was not to be treated as a substantiated finding in light of omitted and contradictory documentation. It stated that future review of the record must include the corrective materials. That was the sentence I read 3 times. Future review of the record must include the corrective materials. I leaned back in my chair and looked around my kitchen. Nothing had changed. The sink still had a chipped mug in it. The floor still needed sweeping. My work boots were still by the door. There was no music, no sunlight breaking through clouds, no mother's ghost putting a hand on my shoulder. But something inside the room had shifted. For 28 years, my father had reached every official doorway before me. His sentence stood there with a badge, telling people what kind of boy I had been. Now, if anyone opened that door, they would find my answer beside it. Not a shout, not a plea, an answer. I put the order in the lockbox with the affidavit, the school note, the medical note, and the copy of my father's old statement. I did not throw the old statement away. People sometimes ask me why I kept it. They think healing should look like burning paper. Maybe for some people it does. For me, healing looked like refusing to let the lie travel alone. Years passed after that. My father and I did not become close. That disappoints some people when I tell the story. They want the old man to break down. They want the son to forgive. They want a porch, 2 cups of coffee, maybe a trembling apology before death. Life is not always shaped for the comfort of people watching from outside. My father did ask once if we could start over. He said it during a phone call after Marlene had gone into a care facility. Her memory was failing by then, which felt like an ugly joke life had written without asking me. The woman who had used false memory against a child was losing her own. I took no pleasure in it. That surprised me. I had imagined when I was younger that her suffering would feel like balance. It did not. It only felt like another broken thing in a world full of them. My father sounded tired on that call. He said, "Maybe we could start over, you and me." I was silent for a while. I thought of the boy in the hallway. I thought of the man at the table. I thought of the blue pen. Then I said, "Start with the truth." He breathed into the phone. I signed the paper. "That's not the truth," I said. "That's the fact." He did not understand at first. Maybe he still does not. Facts are what happened. Truth is what you stop hiding about why. We spoke a few more times before he died. Not often, not warmly, but differently. He never became the father I needed at 13. That man did not exist, or if he did, he was too weak to reach me when it mattered. I stopped trying to resurrect him. Once, near the end, my father said, "I should have looked harder." That was the closest he came. I accepted it for what it was, a small, late coin dropped into a very deep well. It did not fill the well, but I heard it land. I am 66 now. I still keep the flannel jacket in my truck. The elbows are almost gone. My neighbor says I should throw it out. I tell him it still works. That is not entirely true. It is too thin for real cold now, and one of the buttons has been replaced with one that does not match. But I keep it because it reminds me of the life I built with my hands, not the one they wrote for me. The court order is still in my lockbox. Every few years, usually when I am cleaning or looking for some unrelated document, I take it out and read the line again. Future review of the record must include the corrective materials. It is not poetry. It is not a father's arms. But it is a doorstop against a lie. And sometimes that is what justice looks like for quiet people. Not revenge, not ruin, not the guilty begging in the street, just the truth, attached firmly enough that it cannot be peeled away by tears, excuses, or time. When I think back to that courthouse hallway, I still see the paper cup first. A 13-year-old boy holding water he could not drink, trying not to shake while the only parent he had left told a judge he was lying for attention. For a long time, I hated that boy's shaking. I thought it made him look weak. I know better now. That boy was not weak. He was standing in a room full of adults who had already chosen the easiest story, and his body was telling the truth even when nobody else would. My father's signature followed me for 28 years. Then mine followed it back. So if you ask whether I forgave him, I will tell you the only honest answer I have. I forgave myself first. I forgave the boy for crying. I forgave the man for needing proof. I forgave every version of me that wondered whether maybe they were right. As for my father, I let the file speak to him in a language he respected. Ink, dates, signatures, consequences. And when he finally asked if we could begin again, I did not say yes. I did not say no. I said, start with the truth. Because a father who calls his child a liar in court may still want a second chance. But the child he buried does not owe him silence as the price of giving it.